The six things that I'm talking about today are different than I think most audition classes. Most classes have great material. They talk about how to use your voice, um, make sure you add character, add emotion, things like that. I'm talking about six completely different things, like really an overview of casting. And they should change your mindset a lot. There's I think you'll probably hopefully you'll want to take some notes. And usually different things register to different people because you may have done some of these things, but you may not have thought about them all. Okay, so brief introduction. Your jobs are hard. I'm sort of happy that I'm not a voice actor, right? I'm a voice director. My job is, I think, in many ways easier. You guys are given this like weird task of sounding natural, which theoretically should be easy because all day long you talk naturally, but you have to do it with someone else's words and in someone else's emotion. So it makes it a little challenging, right? Once you get the hang of it, it's fairly easy. But getting yourself up and running in this industry does take a mindset shift, which is again what we talk about today. There's this sort of like this conundrum that voice actors go through where you're given these auditions and you're given direction from the client, and you think, well, okay, if I follow this direction to a T, if I'm technically perfect, well, maybe no longer do I sound natural. But if I sound natural, then I'm not technically perfect. And you have to think about, well, how safe do you play your auditions, right? Do you follow every technical aspect of your audition to a T, but now maybe you're no longer infusing personality into your read, but personality is so important. And anyway, this is the daily challenge. And that is coupled with one other thing that makes it challenging. And that is that client's direction is not always that easy to parse.
No.
And we are in the same boat because we are sort of the liaison between voice actors and clients in a very different capacity than voices. We think the world of voices. What we do is like in a different area of the industry. But we are also dealing with clients who send us limited direction, confusing direction, ambiguous direction, no direction. And we are told by our clients to find voice actors and direct them through these recording sessions, getting a natural sound. So we are where you are. So hopefully, well, I know that the 6 points that I'll talk about register with all of us at Edge, and hopefully they register with you. The first of 6 steps is groundwork. This amazes me, but most voice actors don't do their homework.
Right.
Every time, I'm telling you right now, when you are given X number of auditions at the end of the day, when you get home from work and you have 10 auditions and you want to crank through them all, it's better to not get through them all. It's better to just get through a small handful of them and do a better job than it is to get through them all and do a lesser quality job. And that good job starts by doing some groundwork, some homework. Do some research on these clients. Now, by the way, I recognize that you're not always given the client name. It's not always possible. But if you can do some research and learn a bit about the product or the client or the service that you are talking about, whether it's a film or a commercial or whatever, you can learn a lot. So for example, if you're given a museum tour and you can tell that this is an excerpt of a museum tour, see if you can figure out what museum it is. Learn about the demographic of that museum. Is it visited by kids, by adults? You will start to learn a whole lot about things. Interestingly, if you're given a commercial for a product, sometimes if you can figure out what the product is or the client, do a search, because sometimes you will find out that even a client who has been running commercials for years and years, you may see a press release that they have switched advertising agencies and are looking for a fresher voice because they've been doing well in the elderly market, but not the younger market, or whatever it is, the example. You can learn a lot. It's amazing how much you can learn. 5 minutes. Give it 5 minutes of research for any new script. And I feel pretty confident that you'll at some point get some information and you'll say, okay, that was super helpful in helping me figure out how I should audition. Second thing to talk about, this is a big one. Change your mindset. I mentioned that earlier today, and that is really one of the most important things you guys can do. Before I explain what I mean by change your mindset, I want to give you a little story. Just about every day, probably at least 3 or 4 times a week, a voice actor will call me or email and say, I don't know what happened. I don't know why I didn't get called for that job. I had this audition, David. They say, this script is like written for me. Like the direction,
Yeah.
the clients, what they're asking for, like this is me. Like, I should have won that audition, and I don't know why I didn't win it. I think it sounded fantastic. I loved what I did. I loved my variety. I loved my energy. And it's I this and I that. And I say, there's the problem. The problem is that you're saying you love it. Have you ever asked yourself if the client will love it?
Right.
As a voice actor, your job is to satisfy clients. And so you have to change your mindset and stop worrying about what you're doing for yourself, but worry about what you're doing for them. This is going to be a kind of a long discussion here. This is probably half of our webinar right now. This is that mind shift, that switch is so important. Actually, we're going to talk a little, I might get sidetracked for a little bit and come back to this. But do remember about changing your mindset and why it is so important, because this is all about satisfying your client, not satisfying yourself. I will say last thing about this. When I talk about this to a voice actor who's lost the audition, and I say, well, did you ask yourself if the client will like it? They'll say, no, I just know that I liked it. I think it sounded great.
Yeah.
And I'll say, well, put yourself in their shoes. What are they listening for? What are they thinking about? Would they like it? If you were them, what would you think? And they say, oh, I never thought about that. And I'll say, well, then why don't you do that? See if you can get a re-recording in, right? If you can submit one other audition. Sometimes usually that's not possible, but every once in a while it is. There might still be time left. And then get back to me. And so we will get back to this in a moment. Third of 6 steps is to make sure that you match expectations. This is another big thing in really like increasing your booking rate and winning big jobs. To match expectations means that you need to make sure that your audition is heard and appreciated by the various casting professional. But the problem is, and as I said earlier, there's like there's this conundrum, like you don't know exactly what the client wants. Well, likewise, you don't always know who is making the casting decision. And there are so many different kinds of people who may participate in the casting process.
Right.
I want to run through some of these. 7 or 8 different people who may participate in the casting decision. The first, the client. So think about this. You are the voice actor. You submit an audition. Someone on the other side listens to your audition. Maybe it is the client. Okay. They are one of the people who often participate in the casting process, the casting decision. So what is a client listening for? You guys can all think about that for a second, right? What would a client think about if you owned a company and you are not involved in voiceover? All you know is you own a company and you need a voiceover for your business, for a commercial or for a training video or whatever, or a telephony system. And you get auditions. What would you, as the client, be listening for? You probably want to make sure that your client name, your business name is ultra clear. Your product is ultra clear. Some of those big ticket items, those words need extra clarity. Just like if you had a billboard for your company. Imagine it's a big billboard on the side of the highway. You would tell the graphic artist to put your business name and the product that you're promoting in extra big letters so it stands out. Sort of similarly in a casting call, in your audition, I should say, you need to make sure, or you would be, as the client, you'd be listening for the product name and your client name to make sure that they stick out. But for some reason, most voice actors tend to say the client names and product names much faster on their auditions. I still don't really understand why, but for decades, 3 decades, I've been telling voice actors, like, dude, slow down on the client name. Like, your whole audition is at the right speed, except the client name is extra fast. I don't know why this happens, but you guys, voice actors, probably 99% of you, and I'm not exaggerating here, read the client names at the same speed and typically faster than the other words. Whereas, well, and in fact, the analogy would be having that billboard that I spoke about a few minutes ago and having the client name be in smaller letters. Smaller letters means that the driver by won't have the ability to see your client name or the product you're selling. You need you need the words in big letters. You need to do the same thing. So in case, and here's the key thing, in case the client is participating in the casting decision, listen back to your audition before you submit it and say, okay, let me pretend I'm the client. Let me make sure the things I listen for are clear, like the client name and the product name. However, other people, like focus groups, sometimes participate in the casting decision. Let me explain what I mean by a focus group. Um, Very often, when a company is spending a large, when they have a large advertising budget for their product, like a $10 million budget or $20 million for their ad campaign, the company, the advertising agency, will typically hire some voice actors, get some, or even take some auditions, and play them for focus groups. They're going to play that your audition for a focus group and say, okay, here's a 30-second recording. Listen to it once, and a room full of people listen to it. I don't think it's done in real spaces anymore. It's probably all done remotely, but it used to be done in a room. And so 10 or 20 people in a focus group will listen to your audition. And then the moderator of the focus group is going to say, great, you heard that once. What is being sold? What's the subject? What was the email address to email for information? What was the phone number if there was one given? What was the customer supposed to do or the listener supposed to do next? What was the key takeaway? And the moderator is hoping to find a voice actor who is auditioned in such a way that the focus group can answer all of those questions correctly. Certainly, if the focus group can't, then that voice actor won't be hired. I mean, that makes logical sense. So when you listen back to your auditions, say to yourself, okay, well, if there's a focus group participating in the casting process, what would they be asked to listen for? The subject, what is the script about? What is the subject matter? What should I do next? Who should I call? What was that phone number? And you'll realize that you may realize that the words that you read in that audition aren't really answering those questions. A common thing is like phone numbers. There might be a phone number given in a commercial, and when voice actors read those phone numbers, they're not done in a way that's easy to remember. Like voice actors tend to go very quickly on phone numbers. Well, then how can like the listening public walk away and remember that phone number? Anyway, your job as a voice actor is to listen back to your audition before you submit it and make sure that a focus group could answer any logical questions that they may be asked. Third type of person who might participate in the casting process would be, let me see who I have third, would be the copywriter. Very often, copywriters are participating in the casting decision. So what are they listening for? Well, they're listening to make sure that their messages are clear. Very often, copywriters put heart and soul into the script, and they have clever words, connections between the beginning and the end of the script. Just interesting, smart things done throughout the copy, plays on words. You need to make sure that all of that comes through. You need to spot those things and make sure that they come through. The thing I keep saying to you is, because if the copywriter is participating in the casting process, then you need to make sure you satisfy them. Another type of person who would participate in the casting process would be the engineer, an audio engineer. I can tell you right now that our audio engineers at Edge Studio very often participate in the casting process.
hmm
And what are they listening for? What do you think? They're listening for sibilance, popping, room noise, overall studio quality. So in case the audio engineer is part of that casting decision, you need to make sure that those things are satisfied. The fifth person would be the video editor. Now, not every audition will eventually be matched to video, but a whole lot of them are, right? I can think of very few areas that typically don't have video. That would be telephony, audiobooks, radio commercials, but most other things have some kind of video element. And I've seen so many good voice actors, really quality voice actors, not be hired because they don't sync or match their voice to the tempo that the video editor is hoping to hear.
Right.
Let me explain what that means. And it's kind of like this will sound like a sidetrack, but it is a sidetrack, but I will eventually come back to where we are. So when you get a script, any of us in the voiceover industry, when we get a script to work on, you get an audition, we get a piece. We are like at the end of the food chain. And voiceover is last. Because by the time we get the script, certainly a client somewhere has paid for a copywriter to write the script, and video has typically been done. very often sound effects and music have been added to the video. There might even be a scratch track or a rough track, which is like a template voiceover track. Like all of the other production elements are completed by the time we get around to adding voiceover. So when a video editor listens to the audition, to your audition, they're envisioning the video in their head. So if you read your audition and there should be spaces between different parts of your script, but you don't leave space in your read, then to the video editors in their mind, you're rushing, you're too fast, you're ahead of where they need to be. You're not leaving time for listeners to absorb the words, to absorb the visuals, to hear the music, to hear the sound effects. So what is interesting is very often, I mean, many times, I have worked with a client who says, they listen to an audition and the client or the video editor will say, I like that audition. Their voice is perfect, but they're too fast. They're rushing.
Right.
And what I can do, I can take that audition and just quickly throw some spaces in between certain phrases or certain sentences and then play back for them. And they'll say, oh, yeah, it's fine now. It's not the video editor's job to think about adding space. It's your job as the voice actor or our job as the casting director. So when you audition, if you're talking about, let's say, for example, a documentary, if you're narrating a documentary audition, and you can sort of conjure up a mental image of what the video is doing, and you assume, yeah, I probably say this word, and then there's probably a visual for a couple of seconds, then leave a space. It doesn't have to be 10 seconds long, but leave at least a second or 2 seconds. It makes a big difference for video editors if they are participating in the casting process. Sound editors, they very often will participate in the casting process. I talked earlier about audio engineers, but these are the editors. The editors, they want less work. They want to make sure that your cuts are good, that your edits are clean, because if your edits are not clean, then it's just more work for them. So listen back to your auditions, make sure the edits are clean. Listen on headphones, because headphones display a lot more errors. They really do. Number 7, the marketing team and ad agency, they very often participate in the casting process if it's a commercial. What do you think they're listening for? The overall message, right? They want to make sure that this product is going to sell. The point of all of these things that I'm talking about is that when you record an audition, you should not at the end of the audition say, oh, I like it, right? You listen back. I think that sounds good. Yeah,
Right.
I really like what I did. You need to say, well, will the copywriter like it? What would the copywriter listen for? Okay. Will the client like it? What would they listen for? Will the video editor like it? What would they listen for? Oh, goodness. If a focus group is participating, what will they listen for? You need to go through these steps. If you do your homework up front and you go through these steps, I'm telling you right off the bat, you double, triple, quadruple, some big number, the chance of winning auditions, or at least being shortlisted, minimum being shortlisted. It makes a big difference, because I can tell you from experience from all of these years, 3.5 decades, I think, of listening to auditions and dealing with clients, being that liaison for so many tens and tens of thousands of auditions. This is just what clients are talking about and how we have to help the clients through these sessions. These are the common issues that stop voice actors from getting hired. Let me go on to number 4, which is called don't go on autopilot. So this was the most recent add to this list.
Okay.
For a while, this list of things that I've been keeping had been 5 long, and I added to not go on autopilot. A lot of voice actors hear that they have an audition, and they instinctually assume they know how to read based upon the type of audition that it is. And very often they're wrong. So let me give you an example.
Mhm.
It's sort of a morbid example, but it's one that it's so morbid, it kind of like really sticks out in your brain. So we continue using it at Edge Studio. Our entire, all of our coaches, our voiceover school uses it. So imagine this. A client calls you and they say they have a museum tour, or they don't call you, they send you an audition. It comes through Voices. So all you know is you have an audition for a museum tour. So you're thinking, okay, well, how would I read a museum tour? Well, let's see. The customers walk around, or the patrons, I guess, right, walk around the museum. They have the headset on their ears. So as the voice actor, man, I'm really like talking into someone's ear. So yeah, I better not use too much energy. I better keep it like pretty even keeled. But what happens if the museum is a children's museum,
Right.
right? So you submit an audition. Now, by the way, I see this differently because I'm again working with the clients. You don't work with the clients, but when I work with a client, if I submit an audition from a voice actor to this particular client, the client might say, "Oh, this is like so plain. No, this is a kids museum." So I can go back to the voice actor and say, "Oh, it's a kids museum." So now
Right.
the voice actor thinks, "Oh, man, it's a kids museum. I wish I knew that." And now they make it super high energy, super energetic, bouncy, and lots of variety and smile. And the client says this still is wrong because it's the children's wing of the Holocaust Museum. So now you say, "Oh man, I should have known that." And then now you bring the energy down. That's the morbid part, right? And I
Right.
have recorded personally, I've recorded a ton of stuff for the Holocaust museums, which is very cool. When they opened up in Washington D.C. like 20 years ago.
Wow.
So the point is, when you're given a script, don't assume you know how it's to be read.
Mhm.
One of the first things I talked about today is doing that groundwork, doing your research. Try to ascertain as much information as you can about the product, about what's being like why your voice is being used. Don't go on autopilot. Don't assume anything. Okay, number 5, be unpredictable. So I think I want to begin this with something that recently happened. At Edge Studio, we run a script reading contest every 3 months, and so the last contest that ended, someone in our casting department will go through all of the hundreds of entries, send me the top like 5 to 10, and then I go through. This is something that I've always done, and I really enjoy doing, and I choose first place, second place, and third place, and I write up we write up an article, like a 3-page article on why first place won first place and why second place got second and third got third and why all the others didn't get first, second, third. And you
Right.
can read those articles on our website. So, but the last contest, all of the people who typically would go through the entries were not available. So I gave it to someone else in the office, someone who works on the education side of our business, and they know voiceover inside and out. They are not a coach, they are not a director, but they know this industry really, really well. I said, do us a favor. This is like not your typical job here, but can you just
Right.
go through these auditions? He must have gotten through like 100 of them. And so, like, he said, it is unbelievable how they're all identical. I said, I
Wow.
know. He said, I'm at the point now. He said, David, like, I hope this is okay. Like, I hit play, I hear the first word, and I could read along with exactly how they will eventually read because they all do the exact same thing. So I just
Right.
hit stop and I move on to the next one. I said, yes, which leads to number 5, as I introduced already, to be unpredictable. This means be different, offer something different. But the key is to always do it within the confines of the direction. Like, don't be so different that you don't do what the client wants because
Right.
you're probably not going to get hired. But can you do something a little differently? Can you look at a script and say, you know what? There's a fair chance that every single person who auditions is going to do X.
Yeah.
So maybe try not to do X. Maybe do something a little differently. One of the biggest reasons why voice actors are hired is because they satisfy the two sides of voiceover. They satisfy the technique and they satisfy the emotion. They're both key. Let me explain that. Quick side note. The technique is so important, right? It's critical. We teach a lot of technique at Edge Studio in our voiceover school. The technique is being able to read a script to time, or if a client says, "Can you slow down on this word, or speed up on that word, or add a dramatic pause, or to remove a pause, or emphasize this word, add some smile here," whatever it is, that's the technical stuff. And then there's the emotion of the piece, the acting, the authenticity of being human beings, and those things are so critical also. And a lot of people who audition, get so caught up in the technical end of things that they don't, I said it earlier, I like how I said it earlier, they don't infuse that personality. And when you don't infuse personality and change and something unique into your voice, you're probably not going to get hired. So come up with something that's a little different. I'm going to repeat because it's so important. Make sure you follow the direction that the client gives. But past that, give a different take on something.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 6, last thing, get a second opinion. I, to this day, don't understand why more voice actors don't get a second opinion. It's going to go a bit further than that in a moment. But first, wouldn't you think if you wrote a resume because you were applying for a job somewhere, you'd hand it to a friend or a family member or a spouse or someone and say, hey, take a look at this. It's really important to me that I get this job. So can you look at it? And I would assume that most of you at some point in your lives have done that. And you probably then know that no matter how many times you've looked at your resume, for example, you give it to someone else and they're going to find some mistake. They're going to say, dude, like your phone number, you switched 2 digits, and you'll say, oh, goodness gracious, like I've looked at this resume 1,000 times. I completely missed it. Thank goodness I had you look at it. It's very easy to not see our own things, our own faults sometimes. We get so into it. It's hard to see outside from another person's perspective. So if you have an important audition, an audition that you feel really good about, whether that's because it's a style of script that's important to you, it's a high paying job, it's one that would be great in your portfolio for whatever reason, get a second opinion.
Mhm.
And here's the other part of getting a second opinion, which I think is so cool. When you get a second opinion, have that other person listen to your audition, but don't tell them the direction that the client asked. Okay.
Right.
Don't say, hey, okay, do me a favor, listen to this audition. The client wanted me to go slowly and emphasize this word and add some smile here. Don't say any of that. Just have the person listen to the audition and then essentially play the part of a focus group, of the moderator of a focus group. Say, great, tell me what the script's about. What was the message? What was that phone number? And then say, what emotion would you give to that? Right? What if you had to attach an emotion to what I just read or what you heard? What emotion would that be?
Mhm.
And hopefully, the person who's giving you a second opinion gives the same emotion that you were asked to do from the audition, from the direction of the client. I do remember that very often clients don't give direction, or they give terrible direction, or they forget that you can't read their mind kind of direction.
Yeah.
But when you have that information, it's a really good test. So when it makes sense, get a second opinion. Those 6 steps can really help you do significantly better. I know it because I've gone through this with so many voice actors in past. And if you take those 6 steps
Mhm.
and you do what I said in the very beginning, which is take your 10 or 20 auditions you get every day and just choose the few that make the most sense to you and do a better job with those, do your homework and all the way through these 6 steps, then I think you'll really increase your booking rate.